Listen to the Song of a City, the great theme of a living metropolis, translated into melody as NBC salutes our honor city for today, Boston, Massachusetts, with Big City Serenade, starring Skip Farrell, Joseph Colicchio, and the NBC Orchestra, and your narrator, Henry Cook. From Chicago, we bring you Big City Serenade. It's Saturday afternoon, Skip, so get set for an evening meal of good old baked beans and brown bread.
Well, if that isn't a tip-off on our visit today, Hank, I don't know what is. Baked beans on Saturday night mean Boston, of course, and our NBC friends at station WBZ.
Of course, and I'm only sorry we don't have some codfish music.
Well, I'm only sorry we weren't on the air with us a month ago. Well, let's make it a month and a day.
Well, isn't today as good a day as any?
Oh, any day is good to salute Boston, but remember the old poem, the 18th of April in 75?
Why, of course, Paul Revere's ride.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're a month late in celebrating the famous trip, but we can still point out that any visitor to Boston should make a special point of visiting Paul Revere's goldsmith shop at 175 Washington Street. You know, he really was a great artist in gold and silver.
And right in the same neighborhood, as long as we're starting off on a tour, is the site of the Franklin Printing Press. Benjamin Franklin learned the printer's trade at this spot. Look for a marker of the site at 17 Court Street.
Boston town's a hard place to visit unless you have a month or two. After all, so much of our history has its roots there. For example, you can't miss Bunker Hill Monument, and you've got to visit the old Granary Burial Ground.
I don't care much for cemeteries. Can't we just get that?
Well, not this one. Paul Revere is there. And so are 3 signers of the Declaration of Independence, 9 early governors of the state, and Benjamin Franklin's parents.
Well, then we'll certainly have to include it in our itinerary. What have we got to start us off in Boston in a musical sort of way?
Well, as long as we were talking about the old settlers, what would sound more familiar to them than the old revolutionary song, Yankee Doodle?
That's a good old rousing tune, Hank. Probably the first one the Americans took over for their own song.
You know, Skip, Boston doesn't only mean Paul Revere to me.
No, sure, it means the Cabots and the Lowells.
Well, not only that, it means the clipper ships. It was the clipper ship which put Boston on the map internationally and spread her trade in all directions.
Don't tell me the original clippers were made there.
Okay, I won't, because it wouldn't be true. But the clippers put Boston in the top ranks in trade.
Well, I'm glad to get the clipper ships in this show, Hank.
And one of the best of them sailed from Boston Harbor originally.
Not the Flying Cloud.
No, another beauty, the Sovereign of the Seas, built by Donald Mackay in East Boston in 1852. And don't think the British Admiralty wasn't green with envy every time they thought of her.
If she's ranked with the Flying Cloud, I don't blame her. Come to think of it, I get a little green with envy every time I see a picture of one of the clippers. I'd like to have shipped with one myself.
Okay, Skipper, up anchor then and go on down to the sea. You can do it in song at least.
I must down to the seas again, to the lonely sea and the sky. And all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by. And the wheels kick and the wind song and the white sails shaking. And a gray mist on the sea's face. And a gray dawn breaking. I must down to the seas again, for the call of the running tide is a wild call and a clear call that may not be denied. And all I ask is a windy day with the white clouds flying, and the flood spray and the blown spume, and the seagulls cry. I must down to the seas again, to the vagrant gypsy life, to the gulls' way and the whales' way, where the wind's like a wetted knife. And all I ask is a merry, merry yarn from a laughing fellow rover, and quiet sleep and the sweet dream when the long trick's over.
Thanks, Skip. I'll bet anybody who heard you could see one of the old clippers scudding before a good stiff wind.
Well, naturally, Hank, the best timber went into the clipper.
And naturally, that's just the line I need to take us into modern Boston.
That's a long jump. How can you make it by timber, Hank?
We're going in by the tree route, because for the last 3 weeks of May, Boston celebrates the paradise of blossoms.
Doesn't almost every town with blossoming trees?
Well, sure, but very few of them have the trees you find near Boston in the Arnold Arboretum. It's the largest tree and shrub museum in the country. And you wouldn't ever forget it if you'd been there in May or June to see the 223 acres of lilacs, cherries, rhododendrons, magnolias. Well, I can't even count them up in the time we have.
Well, don't bother. We'll just accept the fact that it's something to see and that Boston's lucky to have this Arnold Arboretum.
Actually, it belongs to Harvard University, and some of the university buildings are there, too.
Do we have some paradise of blossom music?
We have some tree music by one of the state's own composers, Henry Hadley, who came from just outside Boston. Joseph Galicchio in the orchestra and Spirit of the Trees.
Well, Hank, if we can't see Boston's paradise of blossoms, we can certainly send our good wishes by music.
Well, you know, Skip, trees almost symbolize Boston's first settler, William Blackstone, a gentleman who wanted to be a hermit and who settled down in a grove of apple trees more than 300 years ago.
Wonder what he'd have thought if he realized he was settling what was to be known as the hub of the universe.
It certainly is one of the centers of our history. Take old Faneuil Hall. It's called the Cradle of Liberty because so many important meetings of protest were held there before the Revolution.
And while you're counting up, don't forget the Old South Meeting House, where they lined up for the Boston Tea Party.
Of course, that's another spot the tourist in Boston should visit. And while he's wandering around the town, he'd better not miss the
land and two if I see.
That's right. And in the tower are some very melodious bells. 8 of them inscribed, "We are the first ring of bells cast for the British Empire in North America."
I want to visit the State House.
Well, it's one of the good old buildings, that's for sure.
Well, not only that, but inside is a memorial that's typically Boston. You got to thinking of it as, quote, a stage, unquote. And then you run into its tremendous affection for animals. They proved it by adding the dog and horse tablet in the State House. Among all the other heroes they honor, they didn't forget the dogs and the horses who served in World War I.
Little things like that are the ones which make you love a city. Carts on Salem Street near the Old North Church, bringing the homely small bits of living right up to the steps of the dignity of a treasured landmark. The cheerful immigrant peddler finds a living and security right under the shadow of a building which typifies our country. That's America, the house we live in.
What is America to me? A name, a map, the flag I see, a certain word, democracy. What is America to me? The house I live in, a plot of earth, the street, the grocer and the butcher, and the people that I meet, the children in the playground, the faces that I see, all races and religions, that's America to me. The place I work in, the worker at my side, the little town or city where my people lived and died, the howdy and the handshake, the air of feeling free, the right to speak my mind out, that's America to me. The things I see about me, the big things and the small, the little corner newsstand and the house a mile tall, the wedding and the churchyard, the laughter at 50 years. The town I live in, the street, the house, the room, the pavement of the city, or a garden all in bloom, the church, the school, the clubhouse, the million lights I see, but especially the people. That's America to me.
Thank you, Skip. That was The House I Live In, a musical picture of our country.
I think musical salutes are especially apt for Boston, Hank. It's always been one of our most music-loving cities.
The first musical textbook to come out of America was published in Boston in 1714 or 1715. And the first pipe organ was put up in King's Chapel in 1714.
It's quite a contrast, that old reedy pipe organ and today's Boston Symphony.
Yes, and just picture today's advertisements of symphony concerts, along with the first ad of a concert in America. It was in the Boston Newsletter in 1731, and it told the panting public, there will be a concert of music on sundry instruments at Mr. Pelham's great room.
Boston really went overboard in its Peace Jubilee in 1869. A bandmaster who must have had considerable enthusiasm rounded up 10,000 choral singers, 84 trombones, 83 tubas, 83 cornets, 75 drums, 330 strings, and 119 woodwinds. What really set the town back on its heels during the celebration was when 100 firemen in red shirts, blue pants, and white caps suddenly blew in to bang out the anvil chorus on 100 anvils.
I'll bet it was the noisiest anvil chorus ever heard.
And they say John S. Dwight, the outstanding music critic of the day, left town. He couldn't stand noise.
Well, probably the only occasion on record when a concert drove a critic out of town. Although I'll bet there have been times when they'd like to leave.
Well, they're heading into town these days. May's the month the famous Boston Pops Orchestra begins its summer of concerts.
That's so. And Joseph Galicchio and the orchestra have a piece Arthur Fiedler and the Boston Pops made famous. Fiddle Faddle.
I don't know why more critics don't follow Boston's lead in the pop concerts. It's lots of fun to sit eating refreshments while you listen to your favorite light classics.
And then you go over to the old Union Oyster House, and you can step up to the bar where Daniel Webster used to drop in for a hot toddy on cold days.
Well, if we're planning a trip for a tourist, I'd suggest that after that he drop over to Boston Common. That's a spot you shouldn't miss.
Not any more than you should miss Boston, which you shouldn't.
And if you get a high, spooky moon, maybe you'll conjure up a few pictures of the old days on the Common.
Well, the Common's still there, though, and the moon's still new, and I'll bet she'll be riding high tonight, which could be a good cue to skip for a modern tune, How High the Moon.
Somewhere there's music, how faint the tune. Somewhere there's heaven, how high the moon. above, when love is far away too, till it comes true that you love me as I love you. Somewhere there's music. It's where you are. Somewhere there's heaven. How near, how far. The darkest night would shine if you would come to me soon. Until you will, how still my heart, how high the moon.
The moon's high and full over Boston Common tonight, undoubtedly touching up the lion and the unicorn on the old State House.
Well, as long as we're strolling in the moonlight in Boston, Hank, let's go down to the sea again.
We could. After all, we've only mentioned the Boston Tea Party, and we should stop where Griffin's Wharf used to be to honor those old boys who dumped tea in the harbor.
Well, that's fine, but there are a couple of other spots I'd like to see. Take Long Wharf. They built it in 1710. They saw the Redcoats off from there in 1776, and thousands of tourists still take off from there to visit Provincetown.
Okay, we'll let the orchestra set the scene with McDowell's To the Sea. From the rhythms of one of our great cities, Boston, Massachusetts, NBC has built for you this big city serenade. We've presented in this song of a city Skip Farrell and Joseph Galicchio with the NBC Orchestra. Each week at this time, NBC will salute a different city in this big city serenade. This is Henry Cook inviting you to join us again next week when our musical bow will be toward Boise, Idaho. Big City Serenade is produced by Ralph Knowles, script by Morgan Perrin. Our engineer, Robert Becker. Good Times on NBC. Tomorrow, Theater Guild on the Air presents Raymond Massey and Shirley Booth in its production of Ethan Frome. Recipient of some of radio's top awards, Theater Guild on the Air will continue to bring you America's top stars in dramatizations of famous stories and plays. And speaking of famous stories, you're all invited over to the Blandings' famous Dream House tomorrow evening. Cary Grant and Betsy Drake will be your hosts over this NBC station. This is NBC, the national broadcasting company.
I'd like to